Welcome back to the show. I'm Daisy Cousens. So we are here with the wonderful Centre for Independent Studies Director of Energy Research, Aidan Morrison, to talk about the very peculiar argument put against nuclear power in Australia by the Albanese Labor federal government. Aidan, so great to have you with us this evening. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Daisy. Great to be here.
No, very to have your expert take on nuclear energy. I feel like there's quite a lot of there's a lack of knowledge, I think, in the general public about it. So it's good to talk about it. And one of the most harped on anti-nuclear arguments is, of course, the supposed cost. We've got, Albanese and Chris Bowen saying it's the most expensive form of energy. But there's another school of thought, and you've argued that if it's done correctly, nuclear is actually competitive with renewables when it comes to energy prices. So how should it be done?
Look, there's certainly possible, I think it's just worth admitting right up front that nuclear, like any complex mega project, you can muck it up. And the reality is that a few countries recently have done that. They've come in with an immature design or an immature consortium, or just built one or two reactors. And so they've had a big learning curve to overcome, and then not continue to build once they've learnt the right lessons. So the way to build nuclear right to get the lowest possible cost is definitely not to take a small bite of the apple, but take quite a big bite of the apple. So I think we should be looking for a very mature design and looking for a consortium, a partner that can help us build it, that have experience building that. And if you do that correctly and don't just build one reactor, or probably not even two, but build a number of reactors, more like 4 or 6 in the initial order, then you're able to get really good learning. Basically, you get better at building the reactors, and so the first one might be quite expensive, but after that, it tends to improve quite a bit. And that's the way to get nuclear power's cost right down, is to build it at scale the first time from a mature design. And that's how countries in Asia and the Middle East are building their nuclear, and that's how I think Australia should build nuclear.
And the Coalition, of course, has recently announced their nuclear plan. That's 7 nuclear power plants with possibly multiple reactors in each power plant. What do you think of that plan?
Yes, the Coalition have announced 7 sites.
Yes.
It's not clear that they've committed to exactly which sites will have how many reactors, but I think the 7 sites they've identified seem quite sensible. There's some in every state, and they're close to, or they're actually on coal-fired power station sites. So that makes sense because they already have communities that are used to providing lots of energy, having heavy industry. Nuclear would be a better neighbour probably than a coal-powered plant because there's no fine particles that are released into the air. It's only steam that comes from a nuclear power plant. So the communities are probably a great asset to have. Also, the transmission is also there, so there's already transmission at those sites to take the power away. And of course, there's water. You do need water to run the steam turbines. That's the same for coal and for nuclear. So I think there's 7 very sensible candidate sites. And I think the question is, as the Coalition have announced, they're going to have a government-owned organisation support two establishment projects, which I think will be 2 power stations. And I hope they're very big ones indeed, because if we build a large-scale nuclear to replace coal, I think that'll be very cost-effective. And it might not require a lot of nuclear or any nuclear at all 7. Even those 2 stations, if done at scale, I think could almost replace most of the coal base load on the east coast of Australia, probably with just maybe 2 stations, perhaps 3. So I think it's a reasonably sensible plan. Obviously, there'll be more details and decisions to come, and some of those will have to be made by the experts doing the detailed design analysis later on. But there's certainly very good options on the table there.
Yes, I mean, I quite liked the sound of the plan too. And as you mentioned, if it's on already existing sites, well, the transmission abilities will already be there. They'll just have to connect up to what's already there. Whereas if you look at Labor's pretty much all renewable plan with some sort of mythical battery storage technology that doesn't actually exist yet, I mean, they're talking about, and I've said this, implementing, I think it's 28,000 extra kilometres of poles and wires to actually hook these massive solar farms and wind farms up to the grid. Isn't there a certain hypocrisy there for Labor bashing the Coalition for this plan while also proposing that this massive practical exercise, which might not actually work, to wire up renewables to the grid?
Yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that the alternative to nuclear to try to get to net zero involves a hugely distributed, scattered kind of network of wind and solar. And that's the inherent difficulty with renewable energy. Because when it's sunny in one place and you have lots of sun, you want to get some variety and have some solar panels somewhere else as well. So in one place it's cloudy, hopefully another sunny. It means, and the same is very much true for wind, and it means that the next best place to build the next major solar plant or wind farm is as far away from the last one as possible, because you get that variety of weather. And that means you've got to build just so much more transmission infrastructure. So that dispersed system has a huge impact in terms of the required transmission network, which is very much the opposite of something like nuclear, where because you can choose a place and expand to make a very large power site, you just need to have transmission in one place. And I think it's possible we might need to upgrade some transmission if we build a very big nuclear power station at a coal site, but you could use the existing routes. You wouldn't be having to trek through new, untouched, pristine forests or rural landscapes. You'd be able to go on existing routes and use those as you upgrade the capacity at a given site. So, yeah, huge challenge to do the dispersed system with renewables scattered everywhere.
It really is, particularly, I think, with a country as large as Australia. It's all very well, I think, for little European countries to talk, oh, look at us, we're wired up, we're on net zero with renewables. It's like you're this big compared to us. Like, it's quite, I don't think foreigners especially realise how big Australia is and just how much wiring you'd need. And also, isn't it true, as Peter Dutton pointed out, if you want to implement a solar farm or a wind farm, you need these vast expanses of land, you know, so many habitats destroyed, where it was with a nuclear plant, particularly on an existing site, well, it's much, much smaller. Why does that little bit of environmentalism get lost in translation?
It's a really good question. The environmentalists, I think, are slowly coming to a bit of a wake-up moment when they realise the tremendous scale of the renewables that have to be rolled out. It's all very nice when there's a little bit of it to say, oh, I don't mind that little wind farm over there. But when you understand the enormous scale and the massive destruction that has to be done to be able to get, I mean, just the overbuild is incredible. To replace a firm, reliable power source with intermittent ones, you have to have extra volume of the intermittency to make up for that, to be able to catch all the extra energy and store it for the times when it's not there. So the impact and the scale on the landscape and what's happening up and down the Great Dividing Range in Queensland, there's very little wind on the coast of Queensland, so all the wind has to be up and down the Great Dividing Range, which is often in beautiful areas of sometimes untouched forests with huge roads and scars being put through the landscape. So I think that environmentalists need to really think about the land and the ecological impacts of renewable energy, because carbon is not the only environmental metric that matters. Protecting actually wildlife and habitats is also important too. So that has to be weighed up, and I think it speaks very strongly in favour of nuclear.
Yes, I think so. And look, there is a lot of stigma about nuclear energy in the public. I actually blame The Simpsons for this a bit, you know, with their sort of cultural depiction, which is always funny, you know, of a nuclear power plant, hence the great meme war with the three-eyed fish that Labor implemented. I think one thing that people might be concerned with is nuclear waste and what you do with it. I mean, we see in The Simpsons, it's you know, there's a scene with Homer Simpson eating nuclear waste out of a vat, and it's green and radioactive. But that's not actually what nuclear waste is it?
That's right. No, nuclear waste, happily, is solid. The high-level waste that comes from a large power generating facility is in these solid rods, and the other thing is there's a tiny amount of it, and that's actually a dream scenario for all energy systems, to have your waste in a compact, solid thing that is just a tiny volume. For example, to power a power station or a reactor of about 1 gigawatt, so something like 1 million homes for a year. The solid that you'd get from that, because it's so dense, would probably fit under your kitchen table, just one block. That said, you'd also wrap it in a lot of concrete, a lot of cladding, a lot of protection. So it becomes a kind of a cask, they call it, a concrete cask, which is about the size of a car and about as tall as a giraffe. So, and that you just put into a spot, and it sits there for as long as you want to. Completely safe to approach. You can touch it. You can walk around it. There's no issue there. So it's so easy to contain that it's really the least waste concern of any fuel source. The keeping the metals and things like that from solar panels in the very long term is probably arguably more challenging than trying to contain the nuclear waste.
Yes, absolutely, and very well said, Aidan. And thank you so much for coming on the show this evening. It is very important that we clear up these misconceptions about nuclear in terms of the cost, in terms of the waste, in terms of the environmental factors. So I really appreciate you giving your time, and I certainly hope we see you again soon as this nuclear war continues to rage in the Australian Parliament.
Thanks very much, Daisy.